I love liminal spaces. I find them haunting and comforting. So many indie games have come out lately that are inspired by liminal spaces and the liminal space aesthetic. Some of them have been brilliant, deftly capturing what makes those spaces so compelling. Others of them have been so focused on the visuals that they fail to capture anything deeper. Therefore, I've decided to start a series where I play and review games that focus on liminal spaces. I want to find out what makes them tick. I want to explore a world of strange games that focus on the in-between, on places where the veil is thin. And what better place to start than one of my favorite games of all time? Time is Solitaire. Time is Solitaire is one of the most beautiful and haunting games I have ever played, and I love it so much that my mind will not quiet down until I share with you all exactly why this game is so brilliant and why you should play it. Time is Solitaire is a short indie game available for free on itch.io. When the game begins, the player finds themselves in a strange museum where the museum director instructs them to clean 3 paintings in exchange for information about where they are and why they are there. Each time they clean a painting, the painting comes to life and sucks them inside. Within each of the 3 paintings are the souls of people who cannot move on until they let go of their earthly trauma. It is the player's role to help them do just that. Each painting is a personalized purgatory, a transitional space between life and the afterlife, reflecting the trauma that plagues their inhabitants. In order to explain why I love this game so much, I'm going to analyze its 4 main aspects: the visual style, the environment, the soundtrack, and the narrative. Before we go much deeper, I need to give you all some content warnings. The game I'm going to talk about discusses the following content: death, murder, suicide, war crimes, psychological abuse, and existential horror. The game also includes mild visual body horror, including blood. If any of this content will be upsetting or triggering for you, then please take care of yourself and do not watch this video. I personally find the content to be relatively mild, but I'm mentioning it anyway because some people are not okay with some kinds of content. Alright, let's get into it. First, let's discuss the art style. I had the fortunate opportunity to message the lead developer, known as AlgebraFalcon on itch.io, and they shared some of the process behind the game's creation, including the art design. They were inspired by the paintings of Francis Bacon in liminal spaces, so in order to match the surreal tone, they used an AI to generate ideas for their character designs. However, while AI was used as inspiration for the characters, the final designs were worked on by a person on the development team. AlgebraFalcon also responded to concerns about the use of AI in the comments section of the game. They write, "This is a combination of AI art and mine. I generated AI pieces to get an otherworldly feel, then digitally painted over them and corrected them to make them feel more cohesive. This was made before more powerful models like DALL-E and Stable Diffusion were public, so the outputs I was getting were better as inspirations than actual pieces." End quote. Despite the controversy surrounding AI-generated art, I can't help but feel that this particular style suits the game. The game takes place entirely in a timeless purgatory-like liminal space, a space between life and the afterlife. It makes sense that the paintings on the wall would look like half-remembered dreams, like paintings we've seen before but can't exactly recall. The style also fits the character design. Each of these characters is trapped in this place, so it makes sense that their physical forms would also be corrupted. The player character's face is chipped and broken, resembling a defaced statue. The old woman's body shape conforms to the shape of her clothing. The young boy's eyes are gone, and the soldier's body has withered to resemble a baby. And lastly, the museum director, Karen, is just a head, without any arms or legs, and his face is covered in fleshy growths that obscure much of his face. Each of these character designs is significant for their personalities and their stories, but you'll understand that more once we get to the narrative section. I do wish that the art had been made by a person from the start, just to be clear, especially since Francis Bacon's paintings wouldn't have provided plenty of visual inspiration on their own, but I do think that the final result fits the surreal, liminal feeling that they set out to achieve. The environment of Time is Solitaire is a unique take on liminal spaces. Specifically, the environment falls into the category of a heterotopia of crisis. What do I mean by that? Let me explain. First, a liminal space is a transitional space. Places like hallways, staircases, and even doors are liminal spaces because their purpose is to transition a person from one distinct place to another. In recent times, the concept of the backrooms and the liminal space aesthetic has increased the popularity of imagery that focuses on these transitional spaces, and has expanded the kind of imagery that counts as liminal. Liminal spaces are not just hallways and staircases, but can also include hotel rooms, abandoned shopping malls, empty schools, and hospital waiting rooms, where the idea of transition is not as solid. Perhaps for locations like these, the idea of liminal spaces as places in between would fit better. In Time is Solitaire, the museum and paintings are transitional spaces, places between life and the afterlife. However, a significant aspect of liminal space imagery is also the sensation of lingering. Normally, when people come across a hallway or staircase, they travel through them, straight to their destination. They don't stay. It is the act of lingering in a transitional space that gives it that liminal feeling, where time comes to a standstill, and you feel like the only person in the world, trapped in a strange place. Time is Solitaire takes place entirely inside a museum made of strange empty hallways, where time has solidified into an infinite present. The interiors of the paintings reinforce this imagery through mazes, locked rooms, hospitals, and long meandering hallways. However, while the game does take place in a liminal space, it would be more accurate and more specific to say that Time is Solitaire takes place in a heterotopia of crisis, which is itself a kind of liminal space. The idea of heterotopias was developed by Michel Foucault in 1986 in his essay titled Of Other Spaces. In that essay, Foucault defines heterotopia as a, quote, counter-site, a kind of effectively enacted utopia, end quote. Crisis heterotopias in particular are places for individuals who find themselves in a social state of crisis or transition, such as children transitioning to adulthood through a rite of passage. In Time is Solitaire, the characters are transitioning from death to the afterlife. Foucault further defines heterotopias using several principles, but the fourth and fifth principles are the ones most relevant for the analysis. The fourth principle refers to the nature of time in heterotopias. He writes, quote, "First of all, there are heterotopias of indefinitely accumulating time. Museums and libraries have become heterotopias in which time never stops building up and topping its own summit." End quote. In this art museum, time is solid. It does not move forward, not in the way that the player understands time. By keeping time at a standstill, the museum allows its inhabitants all the time that they need to let go. Each painting also requires special rituals for entering and exiting their environments. According to Foucault's fifth principle, quote, "The heterotopic site is not freely accessible like a public place. Either the entry is compulsory, as in the case of entering a barracks or a prison, or else the individual has to submit to rites and purifications." End quote. To enter, the player must first clean the surface of the painting. Once inside, they must then solve puzzles in order to discover the trauma that the inhabitants must release. Lastly, after the player has helped the inhabitants to move on, the player must walk all the way back through the painting to leave. Where other games would teleport the player back outside, this game requires the player to make their own way out. The walk itself allows the player time to reflect on their experience and is itself a ritual for exiting the heterotopia. These rituals also reinforce the idea that these liminal spaces are special, even holy, in the world of the game. You must clean the painting to enter. You must deal justly with the people within, and then you must leave in silence. The soundtrack of Time is Solitaire beautifully fits the themes of liminality, lostness, and of letting go. Even if you don't plan to play the game, you should absolutely go check out the game's OST here on YouTube. Link in the description. Now, I'm no expert on music, so my thoughts on the soundtrack will mainly correspond to the feeling that they give me. Most of the pieces reflect the meandering nature of the game, of the player's gentle, wandering walk. Here are some of my favorites. Swift Vaporwave, Sudden Death, and Sketches Beat. There's no hurry, no rush to get anywhere. The music invites the player to experience the journey of walking between places. Sketches Beat, in particular, includes birdsong, which lends a sense of openness to the environment, as if you weren't navigating an interior maze, but instead wandering through a park. However, despite what you might think about a piece of meandering music, the music is far from passive or lethargic. Instead, many of the pieces have a delicious energy to them that encourages the player to keep looking, keep walking, keep wondering. It is truly liminal music. As an individual who has graduated with a degree in English writing, the narrative will always be the most compelling aspect of any game for me, and Time is Solitaire is no exception. Now, if you care about spoilers for the narrative, then please skip to the time printed on the screen. I will also provide the time in the video's description. When you first awake in the game, you find yourself in a large, empty museum. As you explore, you find a few paintings hanging on the walls, which appear to feature Christian apocalyptic imagery. This one in particular looks like it's based on paintings of the Final Judgment. After wandering through the hallways, you come across the museum's main room, which is home to the museum director Karen. He offers to answer your questions as long as you clean the 3 paintings in the room. The first painting belongs to an old woman who suffered from dementia before her passing. Her eyes are sunken and her expression is perpetually lost. She cannot remember her name, where she is, or why she is here. Within her painting is a maze that she seeks to solve, an environment that is especially cruel for someone like her. Scattered notes on the walls confuse and frighten her with contradictory messages. Some claim to love her, others to hate her, and still others are pure nonsense. Once you reach the center of the maze, you encounter the person responsible for the maze's creation, the woman's husband. He reveals that in life and in death, he has always loved to torment her. However, the trauma that she must let go of isn't his cruel treatment of her. It is her love for him that she must let go. Despite how cruelly he treated her in life, she never stopped loving him. And it is this undeserving love that holds her back. By telling the woman the truth about her husband, she finally gathers the strength to cut him out of her life. She can move on. One thing that is interesting to note is that this painting is only a purgatory for the old woman. The husband cannot move on. In the most chilling moment of the game, you can actually re-enter the maze and tell the husband that she has moved on, and watch him break down as he realizes that the hell he thought he escaped has caught him at last. Once you exit the painting, re-entry is impossible. Instead, you are faced with a clean painting showing only the old woman. The second painting belongs to a boy who is drowned by his father. In this painting, the boy has set up a series of locked rooms half flooded by water that can only open by solving riddles. He thinks that the riddles are extremely difficult and can only be solved by the one he's waiting for, but you solve them easily and find the boy himself sitting under a palm tree by a mannequin of his mother. He tells you that he and his mother love to solve puzzles together and explains that the riddles beforehand were meant to be solvable only by his mother so that only she could find him. It becomes your responsibility to make him face the truth, that his father murdered his family and that neither of his parents are coming for him. He has to let go of his fear of his father and of the belief that someone is coming for him, so that he can move forward on his own and return to his mother. The third painting belongs to a soldier who had committed suicide after he could no longer bear the weight of the lives he took. Within his painting is a dark, filthy hospital stained with blood. After rummaging through the 4 trash heaps scattered throughout the map, you unlock a door leading to a path made of flesh. At the end of this path lies the soldier, whose withered body resembles an infant lying on a hospital bed attached to a life support machine. He confesses his war crimes to you and asks you to unplug them from the life support machine, as the soldier cannot reach it himself. If you unplug the machine, then the soldier thanks you for your mercy and moves on. If you refuse, the soldier accepts your judgment, which gives him the peace he has been seeking. Either choice, forgiveness or condemnation, allows the soldier to move on. I think this choice in particular is fascinating, because the soldier's greatest struggle at this point is with his own guilt. Forgiveness allows him to let go of his guilt and be free, while condemnation allows him to accept his guilt at the hands of someone else, rather than a self-inflicted judgment. But both choices allow him to move on. However, during the long walk back, you encounter a terrifying, spider-like creature. This creature symbolizes the soldier's guilt, as evidenced by its voice lines.
Do you miss it? Can you feel it? Where do you put the pain? Have you looked at your choices lately? Are you still you?
Once he senses that the other part of him has moved on, he disappears. Upon exiting, the player can view the clean painting to see that the figure depicted is not the pitiful form attached to the life support machine, but the spider creature, showing that the part of the soldier's self that needed to move on was his shame. Now, something that I find very interesting about the game's narrative is the fact that even though the museum is meant to help people move on, none of the people in these paintings can move on by themselves. The old woman cannot navigate the maze. The boy can't move on because he doesn't understand his parents aren't coming for him. And the soldier can't move on because he can't forgive himself. He needs someone else to forgive or condemn him. While at first this might seem like a flaw in the narrative, I think it is a very important aspect of how the game treats grief, shame, and trauma. Sometimes our minds get so twisted up in the past that we are no longer able to let go of it by ourselves. We need someone else to come in, find their way through the worst parts of ourselves, and help us. Time is Solitaire is a beautiful game that explores the liminal space between trauma and restoration, between life and the afterlife, through its unusual character design, eerie environments, meandering soundtrack, and thought-provoking narrative. I loved every moment that I got to play it. If you want to try it for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description. But now that this video is finished at last, I too can finally rest my mind and go on to explore other worlds. Thank you, AlgebraFalcon, and everyone on your team for making this game.